Hello. Thank you for being here today. I come from some B2B SaaS companies across Marin Software and WebEx. I've shared and done various roles on the marketing team. My expertise is really on kind of the demand gen, lead gen, and kind of the operations side, and really spent a lot of my time there. So when Nisha, asked me, to come aboard and join her at PagerDuty, I think it was like early 2014. I'd done some homework, done some research, seemed like the perfect company. The company was already kind of growing virally, getting some good traction and adoption in the marketplace. And it seemed like a really perfect place for me to kind of go in and really work kind of our demand gen, lead gen magic. When I first got there, it was very different than kind of what I had actually been used to working at Marin and at WebEx. It was a very developer-focused company, and Marin Software and WebEx, quite frankly, weren't. And so there was an adjustment period and a feeling out period of like, what did we need to do to kind of launch and be successful? And a lot of the programs that we were going to set out to kind of launch, I also needed to kind of carefully think through how it was going to message and come across. So I had the co-founder CEO, Alex. He was an engineer at Amazon, first-time co-founder, had no real experience in marketing. So there's a lot of those questions around, what are you guys doing, and why do we need to spend that much money, and what are the returns going to look like? And so there was a lot of that education and early kind of messaging and kind of really getting that buy-in, right? But more interesting than that was actually the rest of the organization. And so, as I mentioned, that this was a very developer company. Like most of the employees at that time were engineers and product guys. So, there were about 50 people. I would say 2/3 were on the kind of the R&D side, and they'd actually been the marketers. So they'd actually been the ones building the website, going to the events and representing the company, launching the few campaigns that they had done at that point. And it was funny because hearing kind of comments and kind of whispers throughout some of the other teams, you kind of started hearing things like, why do we even need a marketing team? Like, we're already doing fine, or we're already growing really well, so I don't understand why we're going to hire this marketing team and spend all this money and blow through all of our fundraising cash, right? It was an interesting kind of development, something that we had to kind of carefully think through. The other thing was like every time we really wanted to kind of put out any campaign or write any tweet or send any email, we had to think about the brushback and kind of the firestorm this was going to cause on HipChat and our Slack rooms and so forth. And so it was a very interesting first month or two, but kind of taught us, hey, we need to kind of think about how we're going to educate the teams internally, because ultimately growth is really hard and challenging, right? And so what we wanted to do is really kind of set the story that, hey, we've done a great job growing where we're at, right? We built a great product, got really great market fit. We've seen some good early adoption, but to kind of really take the next phases, we're going to have to be really intentional about, how we're going after the market, what we're doing. That early adopter, universe is really small, and kind of fishing from that same pond is not really going to continue to scale. And so we kind of put out a set of kind of just very high-level key objectives. Obviously, gain market share, through customer acquisition, through top-line revenue. There's going to be a big focus on, differentiating or, our positioning and really getting our message right in the marketplace, as we kind of wanted to kind of reach that wider net. And then obviously building the right team. We wanted to scale for success. We wanted to, hire those right A+ players across, different industries. And so ultimately kind of what I want to share over the next, 10, 20 minutes is, what did we do to actually cross that chasm? How did PagerDuty, how did we get to where we are today? What did success look like in the various stages of growth? I broke it out into kind of 3 real phases. The first was kind of like that educate and kind of getting that buy-in. The second, longer phase, was building that demand flywheel, that repeatable, scalable business. And then the third thing was moving into the enterprise. So I'll kind of share some stories, some examples of kind of what we did, talk through kind of the different resources and the people, share a few of those campaigns, and kind of get you guys a little insight on kind of what we did at PagerDuty and kind of what resonated really well. So first one is educate. touched on this a little already. We had to really get kind of that buy-in from the stakeholders, across, especially the engineering team and Alex, our CEO. We spent a lot of time those early few months really kind of making sure we were visible, making sure we were kind of talking about our plan and what we were doing and why we were doing it. We used all hands, we used other company kind of team meetings, really built kind of those alignments and partnerships across kind of the different teams and organizations. It really kind of helped us kind of, build the relationships the right way and kind of get started, right? And so kind of what was the next thing after that? As I kind of mentioned, Alex was, very data-driven, wanted to kind of understand everything that we were doing and the return it was getting. And I knew off the bat, getting our infrastructure and our data was going to be critical. So those first few months, I knew if we didn't kind of get the data right, understand kind of how our systems are working together, how our data is flowing together, we weren't going to really, be able to kind of accurately tell what's happening and kind of what we were doing. So, connecting our Salesforce with our Marketo, with our data warehouse, making sure we were tagging our campaigns the correct way, making sure the information was flowing, and then ultimately understanding what the outcomes were going to be and what did we want to measure and how are we going to kind of get that information back to the right people. The other piece was just kind of buy-in across the organization, across different levels, and we spent a lot of time focusing with different teams in different ways. So from execs, we really wanted them to help us participate in kind of that positioning and value statements, who we are, who we're going after, making sure we're aligned from what product is building and kind of what we're saying, and we can kind of go out there and tell that story consistently, making sure that everyone's telling that story consistently. Our engineers and our founders, they were the ones that lived and breathed the product, so we also knew that they would be great at helping marketing build content and create content and tell that story. So enabling them to go out there and do talks, to host meetups, to help us write blog posts and content was going to be critical in explaining kind of the value that was going to bring to the company. HR and finance, obviously, to get buy-in from why we needed the certain people that we were going to ask for, what the budget was going to be, and especially when we were that early size, resources aren't just being given out. Like we have to go out and really justify what it is we're doing and why we think it's important for us to kind of achieve that for the next, for that scale, right? And then lastly, obviously, sales to help us really get through the right the right stories, understand what was resonating in the market, and kind of getting that out there was going to be critical. So that early kind of phase, we actually weren't doing a whole lot from a program perspective. We had a few ads on AdWords. We went to a few events and started some retargeting, kind of go into a little bit of that, but we didn't kind of go in and just say, hey, we're going to do all this marketing and we're kind of just going to spray the place. A lot of it was the first few months was really about that foundational building and kind of really figuring out what are the few things we can start kind of doing to pick up kind of that scale and growth, right? So Google, we had some early success in some small scale. So for us, it was really to figure out, okay, what other keywords could we go after? What other areas can we kind of exploit? There was low competition really at that point. There wasn't really a lot of saturation in our market, so it was a good place for us to kind of get some efficient returns. And the other piece was retargeting. And so retargeting for me, we had never really focused on too much of that at WebEx and at Marin. And so when I got there, it wasn't kind of an obvious area, like, hey, yes, we have to do this. It was more kind of just really assessing, what was happening and what we were at. But, we actually had a lot of traffic to our website already, a lot of just inbound interest, a lot of visitors. But we also found that we had actually very above average abandon rates on our website too. So we were seeing a lot of people not really making a great first impression. Something about our message wasn't resonating, and we needed to do a little more. So for us, it was really about, how do we really, get that second, third, fourth chance, and how do we actually, get them back into our funnel and get them back into kind of into that mix. So we came out with some quirky, fun ads to kind of really go after the pain points of on-call. We stole an idea from New Relic Days where they gave away T-shirts and kind of used that and saw some good success with take a trial, here's a T-shirt, and actually worked really well for us. And Garrett can probably talk about that. It worked really well for them as well at New Relic. So that's kind of the reasons we started retargeting, right? And so phase one was really a short period. So we didn't actually spend a lot of time there. It was probably about a good 3-4 months. But in those 3-4 months, we were actually able to make some pretty good progress. So we influenced pipeline by 1.75x, doubled the volume of trials within the first 3 months. Our marketing team went from 3 to 7 total. And so we added on, in addition to myself, we added on a marketing ops person to help us build infrastructure and a lot of our automation. We added a digital marketing manager to help us scale our kind of paid search efforts and kind of retargeting efforts. Hired the first couple product marketing managers to create that content and messaging and sales enablement. So it kind of just kicked us off, right? So phase two was really a much kind of longer phase. So phase two to me is like 1.5 years, right? And what I'm calling is like the build phase. So we now have kind of the foundational pieces. We started hiring a few folks on the team, and now we're starting to think about our marketing as kind of a big demand gen investments and then big product marketing investments, right? And what we really wanted to try to do in this phase was really to build that scalable demand flywheel engine that was going to be repeatable, efficient, effective, and consistent, right? And so you could see some of the bullets here. I'm not going to cover those now. We'll kind of walk through kind of what we did with those, but kind of how we thought about our two teams and kind of how we thought about a lot of our investments and programs, right? So this was supposed to be a build, and what I really wanted to kind of focus here on this piece was from the actual early days, we were really only focused on that bottom kind of SEM, SEO piece, right? The word of mouth. So we were only going after that small sliver on the bottom, which was people that were searching for us that actively knew that they needed us. And we were missing out on that kind of entire top of the funnel. We actually knew that for us to kind of get to the growth that we needed and we ultimately wanted to be at, we knew we were going to have to open up that funnel. That kind of, that fishing from that pond wasn't going to be scalable. So we had to find new routes to market. So some early things that we talked about were events. We went to a lot more events. We sponsored some podcasts, upped our social media, started partnering with some industry sites that were very IT focused, where we could kind of really get our message out. Do some display or webinars or some kind of content that was specific to targeting their users. And then in the middle, kind of really layering on that retargeting, that nurture automation, and kind of building out a referrals program, right? So that was kind of the demand programs. And you kind of think about then the product marketing side. We needed new ways to kind of engage or allow our prospects to engage with us. So again, this was a build, and on the bottom, we were really only focused on a trial. That's really all we had when we got there. And for us, at least I think about, when you're taking a trial, you're actively interested in using that product, or you're actually considering buying that product, right? And for us to actually get that adoption up market and to really kind of bring people to that funnel, that trial message wasn't going to scale, or it wasn't going to be as efficient and effective. And so what we needed to do was really think about new ways we can kind of interest people, get them into our database, figure out how we kind of can continue to nurture and develop them into sales-ready leads, right? So we layered on a lot of neat things, contests, ebooks, best practices, video content, demos, infographics, things that were really going to basically reach people in different ways and really kind of allow people to tell us what was interesting to them and how we can kind of further market to them, right? So we spent a lot of time on that in those early days. So social media, obviously, I talked about the programs on social media. From the top of the funnel, social media was a way that was just going to be really, easy for us to scale, highly targeted, We didn't have to spend a lot of money, but we knew we could go after and target, DevOps groups. We knew we could go after and target, customers of our partners, and really kind of find the right people that would be good fit of customers for PagerDuty, right? On LinkedIn, same thing. These are some examples of some of the content, that showed some success early on. We did, this infographic actually was one of the highest performers. I think infographics actually work really well from the state of people just love data and information and content, and packaging up in a fun, creative way, gets that message out pretty well. There was a best practice in outage communications ebook that worked very well for us. How do you basically handle an outage, and who are the people to communicate or bring into a response, right? And then the middle one was a webinar, but this was actually taken from a blog post that was written from one of our engineers. He kind of had this idea. He's like, part of my job, there was this bug, Apache Zookeeper bug. Here's a blog post. We posted it. It ended up being 4 or 5 times the amount of traffic we normally get on our website, literally 4 or 5 times. And we were surprised and shocked, but the amount of kind of just inbound and interest it kind of brought onto PagerDuty, the thought leadership we were showing, it was very organic and natural. But we wanted to basically allow them to, continue to kind of share that through other content, so webinars and other things, right? So phase 2, our calendar started filling up. We're doing a lot more. We have a team of about 14 people now. We're on social. We're on events. We're doing a lot of the things across various channels, and activity started to pick up. We've influenced our pipeline by 2.5x from phase 1. We've doubled the volume of trials from phase 1 again. And as I mentioned, some of the people on the team that we hired were focused on SEO, some events, some social media, design and development teams to help us kind of scale more of our programs among some of them. But really, this was kind of the really big, meaty kind of phase that kind of really kind of set the kind of growth trajectory that we had, right? So phase 3 is scale, and for us, scale was the enterprise, right? We have here volume business enterprise. Phase 1 and 2 were really focused on the volume business for us. For us, it was getting that message out, getting kind of that volume. It was very kind of high volume, low touch, very digital focused. But throughout that period, we were seeing signs of some behaviors in some of our especially larger customers where they would get some users and PagerDuty would spread organically, or usage here, another pocket of team here, another pocket of team here. Our sales team goes in and kind of sells a larger deploy, and for us it was really about selling 100 seats was a lot easier than selling 1 seat at a time, right? And I'm kind of generalizing, but for us. We wanted to really figure out how can we double down on this enterprise business and see if we could put some resources and investments towards it. So we invested in this high-touch, low-volume sales cycle that was really focused on field and account-based marketing. You can kind of see our activity had really picked up across almost everything at that point. We had a team of 20 plus. Before we started, though, we needed to really up-level our kind of brand. And so brand is one of those things overlooked, especially in developer-focused companies. Oh, brand, it's not really measurable. You don't really need to focus too much on it. But our old brand was really quirky, really gamer feel, 8-bit, very DevOps-centric, point solution. And what we really needed to do is come off, and especially going to some shows, talking to some VP level, C-level folks, they were like, what is this PagerDuty? Oh no, this is not something I would ever consider. That you guys are too amateur, right? So we really needed to come off and figure out how do we get that polish, kind of get that message across, make that transformation from DevOps into the enterprise, from a point solution to a platform that could be trusted by an enterprise, right? We started launching a series of high-touch field events across the globe, so Seattle, New York, London, Austin, LA. Partnering with some of our key partners, Datadog, ThreatStack, to do some content-rich, very small, maybe 40, 50 people, but get our sales team there, develop some relationships, and kind of get those conversations moving, right? And then account-based marketing was the other piece that we spent a lot of focus on in those days, in this phase. So I had never really been that involved in account-based marketing before, or not really exposed to it much. So we hired someone from Demandbase, which is one of the top account-based marketing companies. But we found that it was a really effective way for us to really, target a really specific group. So in our case, which is for Fortune 1000, director and above, really figure out the right programs we can kind of reach them in. So, digital focus, direct mail focus, really with the right amount of touches. So through marketing automation, through our sales development and sales teams, and really start building that pipeline intentionally to those specific companies and figure out how we were getting pipeline and opportunities from these larger enterprise companies rather than kind of that spray and pray mentality that we had before. So phase 3 by the numbers, marketing is generating about 85% of our pipeline now. Our shift to MQLs, we've grown. So we've moved from trials only to MQLs, and we have about a 200% growth year over year. We've rebranded ourselves from DevOps to kind of more of a enterprise solution platform. And our team is now 20 plus with larger investments in product marketing, as well as kind of splitting our teams by kind of the enterprise focus versus the volume business focus. And that's kind of where we're at today. We've seen some good successes along the way. We're really excited about the future of PagerDuty and kind of where we're at today and where we position ourselves to kind of set up for the future. I'm running out of time, but the final few takeaways I have are from this is really think about how you kind of build that repeatable flywheel business. At your guys's where you guys are at today, and then once proven, kind of invest into kind of new go-to-market routes. So for us, it was really building that repeatable volume business, and then once we kind of got and kind of had proven that out and seen kind of the scale that we needed to and got the resources and people behind it, was to really figure out, okay, what are some other routes to market? For us, it was enterprise. For some people, it could be international or channels or partners. And we will explore all those as well. Don't be afraid to test and fail. We tested a lot of things that are not in here. We failed a lot. I'm happy to share a lot of those stories with you guys afterwards. But test, fail, move fast. That's kind of one of our mottos internally. It's one of our kind of company I guess just initiatives around just kind of making sure you're not afraid to take risks and innovate and stuff, right? Don't get consumed in optimizing for now. And so what I mean by that is a lot of companies or a lot of people I've talked to, they're always just focused on like, let's make sure we're building what we have now in front of us, but not really thinking about what do you need to scale 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. What are the people you're going to need? What are the programs that are going to be there? How does this tie to kind of the business and company goals? Making sure you're always thinking about ahead as much as you are optimizing for the now, right? And lastly, just have fun. Always keep learning. It's something for my team. I want to make sure marketing. It's tough at times, but it's also very rewarding at times. Having that kind of fun, friendly, competitive environment, it always makes it a good place to be. So, thanks for the time, and hand it over back to Nisha. Okay, cool. Thanks.